Firstly, a very warm welcome to each one of you, and we decided to tweak our panel discussion and to make you involved in this panel discussion, you to be a part of this discussion. So what we did is we took a survey from the people of the industry, asking them the question that what would be your question, your doubt, if we have to ask, we have a panel discussion and they will be here talking about the topic transforming change management. So we received few answers, few questions that we can ask, and we picked the most common questions and we have it in the bowl. So what I'm gonna do is, I'm gonna come to you randomly. All you gotta do is pick a chit and it has a question. You just have to read out that question and our panelists right here will be answering it out. So let's get right into it. All right, let's start it off with our first row. Sir, please go ahead, pick any chit that you would like to. And please read out the question.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. So the question is, how can leaders create a mindset that sees compliance not as a burden, but as an enabler for better development practices?
Can I request Piyush to kindly take it up and please help us with the answer?
Sure. So I feel that compliance is definitely seen as a burden by a lot of people. And there are ways of elevating that problem by automating a large part of it. For instance, I'll give you a live example in my current company. We use AWS config and we have a lot of rules because we work in insurance. I work for Coverfox insurance. And we have a lot of rules that are mandated by the regulator, by their, we have something called ISNP audit there. We have to do a lot of VAPT stuff and so on and so forth. So what we do is we automate a lot of these using a tool like AWS config, which is just one of the tools. There could be there are many vendors which provide such things, which basically automate these rules and make sure that they are adhered to instead of taking a audit approach. It's a rule-based approach. So for instance, just one random example is that no EC2 should be available. Instance should be reachable from outside, from the wild west internet directly, and that is a rule that you can use. And there are a bunch of rules. They're not bunch. They're actually thousands of rules that are pre-available in AWS config that we deploy. And we make sure that we have all these rules available to the auditor when they come in as a screenshot. That also is automated, right? There are ways to automate taking screenshots because most of the times compliance is about taking screenshots and giving to them. So instead of to my DevOps team, my directive is mostly, if you're doing it 2 times, automate it, because there is a chance that you have to do it 3rd time. And that's, for me, DevOps is that, right? It's not system administrator. We have moved away from the world of calling it a system administration to DevOps, because the meaning of DevOps is doing it by code and not doing it by hand as much as possible. At least not the repeated task, right? So yeah, I mean, compliance burden can be automated to a very large extent. I've just given one example, but things like ISMS, where you have to take inventory of all the assets. You need to have live inventory of all, not just laptops and desktops, but also a lot of software things. A lot of supply chain attacks happen due to third-party open source software which is compromised. And we have seen with a lot of logging software getting compromised very famously, where most of the companies were using the same logging software, but there are minor versions of it that keep on happening every day. For that, you need to know whether you are using that software or not, right? And for that, you need to have a live list of that. If something like that happens and then you are asking your team on Slack that, whether you are using that third-party software which got compromised, then it's already wasting time. You should know it proactively. And that can again be done by a lot of tools that are available on GitHub, on a lot of scanning tools, right? Which basically take care of these compliance. Compliance is basically rules, right? And if you can automate these rules, then you can achieve it without burdening your team by a lot of proof or taking screenshots and so on and so forth, or manual activity. That's what I would say. Yeah.
Thank you, Piyush, for the insights. But that's not it. We also have one more question. So would you like to please ask it out to the Piyush?
What leadership principles have you found most effective in empowering DevOps team and fostering accountability?
Right. So, see, DevOps teams have transformed over time, right? There used to be a time when system administrators used to be there, devs used to write code, QA used to do the QA, and then the all responsibility was of this operations team or the system administrators who would run the code, and they would act as the custodian of production in a way, right? They would make sure that production is running, is well provisioned, you have enough capacity, and if something happens, they will send the logs to the dev team. They will not ever give direct access to the production servers to the dev team and so on and so forth. I think that generation is mostly passe, at least in smaller, nimble organizations, but also now in larger organization where their DevOps team is now working as a platforms team most of the time and giving these accesses in a controlled manner, in a auditable manner, in a verifiable manner, where you have a logged audit trail. Because see, what's the risk? That you give it directly to the devs to run it, and they would bring production down by making some random changes on server directly, right? Or deploying continuous builds because they are facing a lot of errors and they are continuously committing code and deploying it again and again, and that affects your company's image, the stability of the platform, and so on and so forth. These things have to be codified. That's why DevOps teams as an automation platform or a platform than DevOps as a person is, or a ops as a person is that has changed, right? And that's why we see all these things like Kubernetes, right? I mean, it's a classic example where you want to give a sort of siloed or a firewalled access to the devs so that they can do whatever inside the container that they want to, and that doesn't affect the wider system at all. You can install whatever software you want to in limits, obviously, and whatever configurations you want to, and the ops team doesn't want to be burdened by this. Why I'm telling you all of this about this is that DevOps is a mindset. It's a mindset that the ops team doesn't do a lot of manual things, or it's not throwing the code above the wall to the other side and say that ki abhi mera ho gaya, you handle all of this, right? Whatever errors come is your responsibility. You see, classic example in Amazon, right? Most of the teams are on call. DevOps teams run production in many cases, right? And that's true for a lot of startups, a lot of software companies also, where DevOps, the dev team is responsible very much so for the production as much as DevOps team is. And it's not a blame game. And that's, I think, the primary enabler as a leader you have to do. That it has to be blameless culture. It cannot be that, oh, he did that or she did that, right? That's not the right outcome of it. The right outcome would be what process we can bring in to make sure that this incident doesn't happen again, right? What software we can deploy to make sure that this doesn't happen again. Same with AWS config that I was talking about. Deploy rules that take care of incidents not happening, right? Rather than person being so one big thing I think people should do is RCA, blameless RCS. So anything that happens should be documented, the root cause should be found, and action taken should be published. And this should be published to the top of the management. A downtime happening or a partial downtime happening or system degradation happening should be well documented. You might not have a real solution to it at that point of time, but you should know what the problem is. Otherwise, if you don't know the problem, you will never be able to solve it. So, and that can only come from systems being fixed rather than people being fixed, right? So blameless culture is one such large leadership principle, I would say, that people can deploy. Apart from that, many such things are there, like DORA metrics of Google, and there are many such examples that we find in larger companies, both here and in US, where people have successfully deployed these kind of things to increase the productivity of the DevOps. But I feel the two principles that would really help in building the culture is making sure that the culture is blameless. People should not blame people, but people should say that this process is broken or this system is broken and we should fix it. The other thing is that build this concept with this thought process of automation rather than doing it by hand as much as possible. That building platforms instead of building, instead of doing, even if, say, for instance, something as simple as DB updates. Ideally, it should never be done, SQL updates directly to the system, but we all know it that is required. There has to be a process around it. It should be handled in a safe manner, right? Psychological safety for the teams is also very, very important in this regard, because people should not worry about their jobs, that, I did something wrong and I could be on the firing line. Psychological safety is extremely important for the company, not for just for the people. Psychological safety is important because then teams can be truthful about the real problem rather than, just trying to save their backsides.
Thank you. Thank you, Piyush, for answering the question, and thank you for doing the honors for asking the question. How about we go at the back and ask someone from the last row to please pick up the chit. Sir, can we ask you to kindly read out the question?
Hello. Yeah. The question here is, are the governance models specifically tailored to Agile DevOps that organizations should adopt to stay compliant and efficient?
Weber, would you like to please answer it out?
Hello, am I audible? Okay.
Yes.
So if you look at two keywords that are part of it, one is compliance and one is agility. This can be broken down into largely 4 buckets. One, I think, just from a model standpoint, it's very important to empower your team. So decentralization of decision making is very important. Making sure that your DevOps team is well equipped to take those calls rather than going through the whole hierarchy of decision making. Like Piyush said, there has to be SOPs built in. There should be process to be driven from the team, and it has to be decentralized in nature. The second is continuous feedback loops. Continuous feedback loops help you sort of capture what your applications are doing on the user side and then take those metrics back into the system and improve. The third thing is automation. Like Piyush also added, it's very important to move from reactive to a proactive approach. So capturing these metrics, making sure that you're incorporating them and in cultivating your team to sort of build systems that are resilient and automated is again very important towards moving towards governance and agility. And then fourth is having very clear outcome-driven metrics. Unless you have that, it's very hard for the third point to come in where you start capturing the feedback and then build the system around it. If you have all those sort of things brought into picture and then incorporating that into the workflow and the life cycle, then I think having governance, compliance with agility is possible. And then transienting the application towards becoming more resistant and persistent is an approach to do. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Weber. There's one more question for you.
Sure.
I would ask you again to please read it out for him.
Yeah. Next part is, what strategic work best for changing mindsets in teams that see governance and compliance as blockers to innovations?
Sure. So it's a hard solve. Engineers by default are builders in nature. So they want to build things because that gives them instant gratification when things ship out in the market. They want to take it out to the market in the fastest manner. And And things like compliance and other security measures, they think that it is bringing the speed down. But a couple of measures that can help us sort of build this in the right way. One, I think it has to be top down. So leadership has to take a step. They have to sort of propagate the right metrics to the team so that they understand how important is it. The second is just trying to educate the team in the right way, that hey, this is what is most important, and so that they understand that hey, these metrics will not cause any harm, but actually bring in the customer delight and not anything else. So I work for a company called Check, and we're not regulated but are compliant in nature. And one thing that compliance brings is that there are different types of data that's there. There's PI data, there is credit card data, and unless there is enough compliance, unless there's enough guardrails that are brought in, there can be attacks that can happen in the ecosystem. Just a fun fact, there are about $1 trillion lost by cyber attacks in a year. So you have to build resilient systems, and this sort of information has to be dissipated to the team so that they understand it better. Once that is done, again, bringing it back to your own KRA so that it becomes part of the development cycle, the workflow cycle, so that it's not an afterthought. It has to be made sure that it's part of the strategy that you're trying to build with the team, and then delivering on top of it. If that is done in the right way, the why of the what is clear, I don't think there's going to be any blocker, because most engineers are purpose-driven, and in this way you can sort of build that resilience in the team. That's about it.
Thank you for the crisp answer, Vaibhav. Moving forward, ma'am, I would request you to please ask the next question to our panelist. Yeah.
Thank you. How can change management frameworks help mitigate the risks of rapid iterations in DevOps without shifting innovation? That's the first question. Should I?
Nayan, would you wish to take this up?
Yes, thank you so much. Hope I am audible to the last. I know it's post-lunch, it's difficult to get the attraction, at least attention. Yeah. So it's a very interesting question. When I hear that question, it at least has 3 different parts, right? The first one is the change management framework we are talking about. Second one is essentially we are moving towards agile-based approach in DevOps as well, which is essentially a sprint-based approach where we'll be delivering the work in a faster pace. The third one is without impacting the innovation. So I think whoever created this question, I think made sure we are constraining the time that we had and making sure that we can address 3 different areas actually. To start with, change management process. I think change is a constant that we all know. One of the things that we as DevOps community keep seeing is most often the change. And in our definition, definitely Agile is always responding to change. How do we make sure that we have the systems up and running, the code is actually moving on to the production as soon as possible? That's our focus area always. Keeping those things in mind, obviously we have to make sure there's a change management process which is robust enough, still doesn't become a hindrance. Because your branching strategy that you adopt, your approach that you take in terms of your environment strategy which is aligned with your branching strategy, these aspects matter a lot in terms of how have you set up this change management process. Now, this is where we also start thinking about, instead of going towards a ticket-driven DevOps activity, can we start looking at outcome? Can we start thinking about, are we making sure that the systems which are supposed to run up and running, they are up and running? And are we making sure that the engineers, as Piyush was rightly saying, the cultural aspects, how do you make sure that the culture shift is happening in terms of responding to change instead of telling, have you created a ticket for me, right? What's the process that we are coming with? Who's approving this? When between various sizes of the organizations, we will have a different change management process that's coming into picture. It's important for us to bring in that cultural change, also bring in the right tools in place, because at the end of the day, the change management process also talks about how do we remember what happened in the past, right? That change management database, which will actually have a lot of information in terms of your past experience, those elements matter a lot. That's where your tools, your process in terms of how we adopt it, the root cause analysis that we were discussing about. These elements actually help us a lot. Now let's take a next step in terms of adopting Agile in the DevOps space. There are still places where we see they are managed in a ad hoc way. We just don't follow the typical approach in terms of, how do we track this work which is happening. While tickets is what we typically look for, there's also an element in terms of looking at, are we holistically looking at our infrastructure? Are we holistically looking at our pipelines that we have built? And at the end of the day, DevOps is actually a fabric which is connecting end to end for you. Your requirements which are coming all the way from how an initiative is getting triggered to the way where you are actually building the whole engineering solution with the best engineering practices and validating it, qualifying it both from quality and security point of view and pushing on to production. How are you making sure you are validating that? So these are the elements where your DevOps actually acts as a central fabric. Now, once this element has to be there, you also need to make sure there is a continuous iteration that's happening. And also you're bringing in the best engineering practices. The last but not the least, innovation. Where does the innovation happen? If at all we are expecting a lab to be separately set up and actually make an innovation happen, it's not going to work. Because most of the times, innovation comes with the fact that it's the necessity of the moment. A simple example I can quote from my past experiences, we had a scenario where we were working for one of the large pharma enterprise. Their situation was, for every access that you need, there was a ticket that needs to be raised. And we had at least 15 different vendors involved in those tickets, right, who would actually have an SLA of 1 to 3 working days. Even if I take 1 working day, it's 15 working days, which essentially means 3 weeks gone. Now let's imagine these are pharma companies, they are not IT companies, right? They will have their business use cases to be validated, pushed. Let's imagine there's a clinical trial which is happening. Clinical trial, we all understand how important it is, and we saw in the pandemic days how important it was. And it was important to look at how do we shrink the time. Now, if at all we are waiting for 3 weeks just for a single person to get an access, we know what's the challenge there. So what we did, the innovation happened there. We went back and suggested to the customer that, hey, you know what? There are 10 tools for which you need access. And this is your process where you actually raise a ServiceNow ticket and you actually go through this process. Why don't we automate this for you? We went with something called as one-click automation, where onboarding became 15 minutes job instead of 3 weeks job, right? So these are the innovations which happen. And this is where your change management process is necessary for you to keep a track, because companies like where we are discussing about making sure that we maintain the track of everything that's happening. An audit trail is important from a compliance point of view. It's also important for us to keep a close watch on how long we are actually really taking. That's essentially where I think the approach we take in terms of DevOps can help us a lot.
Thank you, Nayan. We have one more question for you.
Sure.
Yeah, the question is, how does governance in Agile DevOps differ from large enterprises versus startups or smaller companies?
No, that's an interesting question again, because it kind of covers the spectrum of all the kind of organizations that we work with. I represent an organization called Altimetrik. We are a product engineering organization. When we say product engineering, we do services, but we focus mostly from a product point of view. Where does the product innovation really happen? Most of the times it's in the small startups is how we really look at it. So that's where we have a spectrum of, we work with startups as well as the mid-sized companies and also the large-scale enterprises. The governance model actually differs a lot, because the way we operate in a smaller organizations, especially in a startup, is completely different, because it's a small bunch of folks who are all like-minded, trying to see how we can make sure that the product is going live as soon as possible. Now, the tools, the processes, everything is just getting up on the, from their chair and saying, hey, buddy, I need this. Can you do this for me? That's usually the case. But when we actually go for an enterprise, large-scale enterprise, this differs. The simple reason being 2 things. One, there are departments. Basically, what the DevOps collectively started operating and actually helping us out, which is development will build something, throw off the wall, and ops is there to catch. That's exactly the situation that you see with the larger enterprises between divisions. Because there's no tools optimization we can see. These are challenges, real-time challenges that we see quite often, right? The processes are different. The approach that they take in terms of managing the outcome. Because what you're looking for is a convergence point. Because you're building a system large scale. And your system need to be bringing you the synergy as well as should be built in a similar standard and a format. And that's where your governance model plays a major role, because you need to start looking at adopting some of those scaled agile frameworks, like less as well as safe and things like that, where you have a planning that will help you to converge together on a repetitive basis. Because at the end of the day, what's important? We are trying to solve the customer's problems, right? If at all we are still stuck with the processes actually reducing our speed of delivery, we have a challenge. So that's where the approach you take in a startup is slightly different when it comes to governance. But the overall approach, holistically, if you look at it, if you are following Agile and adopting DevOps, you still have some of those approaches still remaining the same. You still have 2-week sprints that you will follow. You still have an outcome that you'll actually look for at the end of 2 weeks. You'll also look for how do I make sure I'm learning from the mistakes that I'm doing. If the same principles are adopted here, there are organizations which claim themselves to be 20,000 large startups. We do have those examples as well. So though the governance process is slightly different, it's important for us to learn from each other, because when you need scale, we were having a very interesting conversation before this session where how scale can impact our ways of development, right? So we have, in this panelist group, enough amount of experience where they have scaled applications to a pretty large size, right? Their experience speaks very clearly that when you are building at scale, you still need to stick to some of those governance models which are standard and necessary. Very similar to that in a startup, when you start building something, you also need to keep your vision, which is 5 years down the line. How am I going to handle it? Simple example, NPCI, the UPI payments that we are, just did a program for them for B2B payment that is happening. Can we imagine the number of transactions that they have built the system for? Any ideas? Any wild guesses? One, yes. Sorry, 16?
16 million.
16 billion for how long? What's the duration? 1 day? 1 month. Okay.
16 billion for 1 month.
Yeah, that's the current state. Okay. Do you know what it can scale for?
Yeah, 10 billion a day.
Yes. So the reason why it can actually do it is, by default, the design, this is where we talk about the India stack, right? Where we actually have built it a lot of things using OpenStack systems. You can actually handle 10 billion transactions per day. It's massive. I mean, if you look at the scale that we are talking about, it's massive. How is that possible? Again, it's a startup culture that is still running this team, which is essentially taking care of building these solutions. So while the governance model comes into picture and actually we look at how it can start helping you out to sticking to your outcome that you're looking for, it's also important to innovate. It's also important for us to look at how can we speed up the overall delivery cycle.
Thank you. Thank you, Nayan, for the insights. And with this, we move forward. I'm going to ask you only to pick one chit and ask the question.
So question is, what practical steps can organization take to embed change management framework work without slowing down their Agile DevOps process?
Rajdeep, would you like to take it up?
Can you repeat the question again? Sorry.
Question is, what practical steps can organization take to embed change management framework without slowing down their Agile DevOps process?
Okay. So basically, in your change management process, the better you plan, especially when you're talking about Agile and all, the better you have planned and, you are taking, unknowns into the factor, the better you will have, in terms of, the faster release cycle or the feedback loop, right? Let's say, I'll start with the very basics, like sprint planning, right? Or your, first of all, you start with your roadmaps, what do you see your roadmap look like for the month or a quarter or a year, right? You start from there and you start planning from top down, right? What does your business objective look like for the year? What you're planning? Then you slowly start trickling down that what all features you see getting rolled out in this week or a sprint cycle, right? Next thing is when you know that these are the features that might come in, how your development loop looks like, right? how fast, the team can, build the code and, you are ready to ship that. Now with a lot of compliance, you come in, lot of security issues might, come in while you are into that development loop, or maybe there are some different issues that might come in, a lot of issues that have come in, like, approaches that have come in, like you go to a shift left approach, right? While you are coding, how can you basically catch those, performance issues or security loopholes, right? That is one way to basically speed up, your cycle for later on, less, iterations also, right? Similarly, when your code is ready, are you, writing all the unit test cases, or, your performance test cases or resiliency cases, right? Keep doing that in your cycle. Now, a lot of companies have started leveraging, Gen AI for those cases. A lot of MLOps models have been built to, make this a faster cycle. When you are done with your development phase, how does your, testing cycle looks like, right? Now, earlier the classic case used to be like, you basically build your code, you give it to your quality engineering team, they will run some, they will do some manual testing, they'll have some part of it as automated test cases. Now slowly, with the evolving times, the company or the teams have started, they want to consume these repetitive cycles as a service from these teams, right? They don't want to wait on them. They want to consume those test cases and just make it automated, right? So once you are done with the quality engineering, you move to the actual, code delivery cycle, where you have a pipeline in place, and you're building the code, and you have different, compliances embedded into your pipeline flow to basically do a promotion from your staging to your pre-production to your production cycles, right? Also, are you doing, how resilient your, architecture is? Basically, let's say you are deploying the code and something bad happens, there is some issue, performance issue, or some, logic issue is there. Can your systems withstand that fast pace of change, right? Similarly, concepts like canary can help, right? You're slowly doing a progressive change. You test it on a few customers. If it doesn't work, you roll back fast, right? So apart from this, how you are basically measuring the performance of these codes or your systems, right? One thing where agile methodology, or this configuration continuous deployment is happening, one thing we miss is the costing part, right? That comes to bite us later on. So when you are shipping release, what impact it has on your cost? Are you measuring the performance and all, right? So the faster the loop cycle is, the better you are prepared for this, faster iterations, and slowly you can keep improvising on this flow.
Thank you, Rajdeep. There's one more question for you.
So question is, can you share any success story where automated change management transform visibility, accountability, or operational efficiency?
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, our team is also here. So they know, I mean, like how, it has transformed them, but I can share a few stories. So earlier, at Lenskart, we used to have, one team which is called as the so-called DevOps team, right? They were doing a typical sysadmin job. They'll get the code and just ship it, right? They didn't knew actually, about what the config change was, or what code was getting shipped to production. Their only job was to trigger it, to production. Similarly, there was a communication loop breakage between development team to quality engineering team to product team, right, and the final stakeholders, right? So what we did was that we basically, rather than making like a siloed processes, we orchestrated a pipeline in such a way that all this process gets plugged into this whole flow, right? And the impact was that it was able to basically have more transparency, what basically DevOps, aims to achieve. We've had, specific authorizations to the team which had to be given. And rather than actually doing, approach where we first create the ticket and then just move ahead with the process, we embedded the ticket creation process into the pipeline also. There was no manual process, everything was automated, and it was more like a click based, The go no goes that we used to happen, they were like much more faster, right? And the impact was that from 8 releases per week, we went to 1,000 plus, right? In such a way that, our CI/CD, tools are now cramming, right? So that is something out of a different story. We are working on, kind of upgrading those systems now. But, this is how basically it has helped. One more example probably I can share. So we were earlier, using console where we used to make manual changes. Then we moved that into more of a GitOps flow where we use Gonsol in the flow, right? And now the development team can push their config changes or let's say dashboard changes, right? So we gave them control to, build their own dashboards, make changes. We have moved to documentation as a code where they can trigger their own API documentation, or DevOps team makes their own documentation into Git. And we are basically have a GitOps flow to manage that. So just a couple of them, many more. So I don't, in the interest of time, just.
Thank you, Rajdeep, for sharing the stories. We'll move forward now. We have a few questions more left. I will ask anyone from this team. Please, can you pick it up and ask the question?
What is the one piece of advice What is the one piece of advice you would like to share to all the aspiring DevOps leaders?
Davinder, can you please take it up?
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, sure. There is actually multiple things are there. So if you really want to be AI DevOps leader in the future, so you have to think about a couple of things. I can generally start this one with a small story. If you are for example, you are the leader, you are the captain of the ship. So you have the multiple team members. Some are mechanical engineer, carpenter, and other people are there in your crew member, right? But if you think about everybody is working their own, and any problem is coming, and each person is blaming to other person. So how you feel as a captain, right? So then you can't reach on definitely on your destination properly, or it's so much hackles will be there. So what generally, what do you have to do? So you have to think with the same way into your organization and your DevOps journey as well. So where you have to think about, you should not work, your team members should not work in the silos, they work collaboratively. Because when you work with the collaboration, you know what is the development team problems. They want to send their code in the market so fast. What is your problem? So you can collaborate on that. Then the problem is coming. People is generally not communicate when they have to release. You are not aware, you are not available, reliability is the problem. So same, you have to think about in advance how your system can be reliable more on this. Then again, I have seen the problems in my organization as well, it was there, about the documentation as well, which you have to keep on improve, scale up your team members, and they have to keep on writing what is the SOPs are there. When we have seen that, whenever the critical incident happened, most of the team member is finding the document where it was written. So SOP is there, but they are not able to find. So those things you have to take care, and definitely it will help you a lot on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Davinder, for the insights. Can I ask you to please pick one of the questions for our panelists?
Hi. how can organizations break down silos between IT, compliance, and development teams to foster smoother change management processes?
Sharat, would you wish to take this up, please?
Great. It's unfortunate that in 2025 I'm answering this. The real reason of existence or the word came, the DevOps, was to break those silos, right? And unfortunately we are answering this in 2025. Any reason why? Do you guys have any guess why? Unfortunately, 2007 was the first DevOps paper I wrote and I was presenting in a forum. And in 2025, it's unfortunate that I'm speaking in a forum which is a stream now. It's a team now in every organization. It's not a practice. The whole purpose here is the DevOps, which was supposed to be a practice, now it has become a team. Second, in last 10 years, we got fascinated by the tools which gave us programmability and we went behind it. So what we didn't do? Any guess what we didn't do? What we didn't do is the first principle thinking. First principle thinking is, today for example, that's what I was reading here, right? Governance and compliance, right? Now, imagine somebody is writing a software. Some feature is getting built. What is it? It is automating the same manual task. It's a feature, right? But we spoke about automating everything else. Why is it a compliance is not a feature? A compliance governance check is not a feature. Does your product manager write it? We don't. Our product managers don't write it, right? It's all afterthought. That's why we have people and team which has to take care of it. Why? We forgot the first principle. What is that? That's where the Agile and DevOps, all these confusions start happening, right? What's the first principle of Agile? Interaction over process and tools, right? No process. It's all about interacting and making it happen. Working software was one of the principles, right? We forgot all of it. And we went behind the fascinated capabilities we got. And we kept it as capabilities in silos. And we said we will have a feature-based team. What is that feature-based team? A product manager, a developer, a DevOps guy, an IT guy, whatever, with ownership. Again, a first principle. Ownership of shipping working software. We forgot that. We forgot having everybody together in one team to make it happen. Exactly the ship answer, right? A person who takes care of, or a team which takes care of end-to-end of it. We talk about it. But now, we say that we have a DevOps team, so we don't throw code over. Perfect. You ask 3 more questions. Who does what? Developer develops. Then there is a DevOps team which deploys. Is it not throwing over? So we got glorified. That's all. But we forgot our first principle. So the answer to the question is, how can organization break these silos? Is go to the first principle at first place and ask why those were created. Those were created to break the silos. So just maintain it. Everything else, programmability, automation, tools, techniques. Yeah, a Node developer, a Java developer are 2 different capabilities, right? Similarly, a Python developer and an Ansible code automator, whatever, they are different capabilities. Put them together to make it happen. That's it. That is where, so there is nothing called change management. Because if you are changing a software piece, instead of a button to a radio button, that's a change, right? Then why a compliance, governance, or anything else has to be a change? It is just a software. So, but with the different capabilities coming together in the different part of life cycle, that's it. So the answer for that is, go back to your first principles.
Thank you, Sharat. And with this one last question, wow, let's give a huge round of applause. I could see people right there. Thank you for answering that out. And just one last question, and can I ask you to kindly read that question to Swetha? Swetha, would you like to please answer the question that's going to come ahead?
The question is, how do you measure the success of integrating change management and agile DevOps, both from a speed and compliance perspective?
Thank you. So, the current mechanism that everybody knows, like when DevOps comes in a layman terms, okay, there is a DevOps engineer who will do build and deploy. He'll click a button and the script will run and it will deploy. But the underlying vast area that most of the people don't understand is agile ways of working. So the DevOps is very well integrated with the agile ways of working. Means like, okay, we have a planning where we create all the requirements in the DevOps tools. We follow using Azure DevOps, where we record all the stories that are to be worked by the users. And then what is the feedback given by the developers, what are the questions raised. Every data is important for the developer while he's pushing the code into the repository. And once the code is pushed, what happens is like, there might be some change coming in, okay, and that also has to be recorded. It can be used through ServiceNow tool or any other tool. The DevOps tool should be flexible enough to be integrating, means whoever we DevOps engineers has to ensure that we are integrating with ServiceNow, where even the people whoever are raising that CR is recorded in our DevOps tool. Means that automation has to happen between the tools. That breaks the silos of multiple teams working across the organization, right? So when the automation and integration is done between the tools and we are following the agile ways of working, what will end is, okay, there is a lot of data where we can build dashboards. Without data, we can't do anything. And everybody know that, okay, once DevOps build comes, okay, build is successful, fail, what is the issues? We know the data is there in the DevOps tool. But how are we, measuring the metrics? Okay, what is the work done by the developer? What is the work done by the DevOps engineer? How many bugs came? Okay, then I have integrated my code after deployment into the test automation tool. That is also a part of my pipeline. So what are the metrics came from the Selenium automation testing? Everything can be integrated into the DevOps dashboards. That's where we'll have a single pane of glass view where we can measure the number of builds happened, number of work items that are being completed, number of bugs that have come, and what is the sprint status. All these metrics can be done in a single pane of glass. That's where we are actually forming a unified glass across the organization on the status of the project. So this visibility of DevOps engineers only will come if we automate all these gaps and we build that platform where everybody can see what a DevOps engineer is actually doing. Or else we will die soon if it is just CI/CD. That's it.
Thank you so much, Swetha. With this, ladies and gentlemen, let's give a huge round of applause to each and every panelist. Thank you for your insights.